As the story begins to unfold under the quiet glow of Halloween night, let your eyes grow heavy and your breaths grow soft. Imagine yourself in a sleepy village where children tell tales of a mysterious candy witch whose sugary world lies hidden deep in the forest. Tonight, I'll guide you into a world of temptation, mystery, and resilience. A story that dances between dreams and whispers. Let this tale carry you gently into sleep. Where only the sweetness of peace remains. There were whispers in the air every Halloween, a subtle murmur that crept through the village like the chill of an autumn wind. Children with wide eyes and quick hands spoke in hushed tones, trading stories of the candy witch as they counted their Halloween loot. Some swore they had seen her house deep in the woods, a towering confection of gingerbread and sugar, its roof dripping with caramel and its windows framed in licorice. But no one ever dared to venture too close, for the legend was as old as time itself, and its warnings were sharp and clear. The candy witch, they said, was no ordinary witch. She did not stir cauldrons of bubbling potions or cast spells over blackened skies. No, her magic was far more insidious. She had a taste for the innocent, for the greedy, for those who could not resist the sweet pull of temptation. With her hands, she crafted the most irresistible candies. Confections so perfect they shimmered like gemstones, each one more delectable than the last. But these treats came at a price. A single bite, just a taste, was all it took. Once you tasted the candy, you were hers forever, bound to her sugary kingdom, never to return. It was said that her house lay at the heart of the forest, hidden by a veil of fog and brambles, where only the scent of caramel and chocolate led the way. Those who were too greedy to heed the warnings found themselves drawn in, led by the intoxicating aroma of freshly baked sweets, only to disappear into her world of sugar and spice, never to be seen again. As the years passed, the legend grew, and parents began to warn their children of the dangers. Never follow the scent of sugar into the woods, they would say. Beware the house that gleams under the moonlight. But as all stories do, the warnings became tales, and the tales became whispers. And children, curious and adventurous as they were, found themselves drawn to the idea of something so mysterious, so dangerous. Felix, a clever boy with sharp eyes and a mind that moved quicker than most, had heard the stories 100 times. But unlike the others, he never believed them. To him, the Candy Witch was just another Halloween myth, a tale told to keep kids from wandering too far from home. Yet, there was something in the way the old-timers spoke of her that made him pause, a flicker of unease he couldn't quite shake. As Halloween approached, the village buzzed with excitement. Children rushed to make costumes, mothers baked pies and sweets, and the air crackled with anticipation. But this year, something felt different. The air was thick with more than just the scent of fallen leaves and bonfires. There was something else, something sweeter, hanging just out of reach. Felix noticed it first, a faint whiff of sugar on the breeze, the unmistakable smell of caramel and toffee, a smell that seemed to follow him no matter where he went. He asked his friends if they noticed it too, but they shrugged, too excited about their costumes and candy to pay attention to a scent. But Felix couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The closer Halloween night came, the stronger the smell became, until it was all he could think about. Then, on the eve of Halloween, as the moon rose high and silver in the sky, Felix found something on his doorstep. It was small, wrapped in golden foil, and shimmered faintly under the moonlight. A piece of candy, just like the ones in the stories. His heart skipped a beat as he picked it up, the foil crinkling softly in his fingers. The scent of caramel filled his nose, sweet and overwhelming. And for a moment, he almost unwrapped it right there. But something stopped him, a chill that crept up his spine. He looked around, but the street was empty. The house is dark. No one had left the candy, yet it was there, waiting. Felix slipped it into his pocket, his mind racing. The stories couldn't be true, could they? As he lay in bed that night, the candy tucked safely in his drawer, Felix couldn't help but feel the weight of the legend pressing down on him. The candy witch, the house in the woods, the children who disappeared. Were they all just stories? Or was there something more to the whispers? Felix was determined to find out. Halloween was just hours away, and with it would come answers he wasn't sure he was ready for. Halloween arrived, shrouded in the usual clamour of costumes, laughter, and the crisp rustle of leaves beneath scurrying feet. Children dressed as ghosts, witches, and ghouls roamed the village in packs, their footsteps echoing in the twilight. But for Felix, there was something different in the air. A tension, a pull that he could feel with every step. He hadn't forgotten the candy left on his doorstep, wrapped in that strange golden foil. It still sat in the drawer by his bed, untouched. But its presence seemed to weigh on him like a secret. No matter where he went, the scent of caramel followed, growing sweeter, more insistent as the hours passed. It was nearly dusk when Felix finally slipped out of his house, his costume half-hearted, more a shadow than a character. He moved through the village, watching the others with careful eyes, his footsteps light and deliberate. It wasn't long before he noticed it. Others had received the same candy. Felix spotted a group of children gathered at the end of the street, their faces lit by the last orange rays of the sinking sun. They were huddled around something, voices hushed with excitement. As he drew closer, he saw it. The same golden-wrapped candy passed from hand to hand like a treasure. One child, a boy no older than 8, held the candy close to his nose, inhaling the intoxicating scent with a dazed smile. "Where did you get that?" Felix asked, stepping forward. The boy looked up, surprised. "It was on my doorstep," he said, his voice dreamlike. "It smells so good, doesn't it?" Felix nodded, but his stomach churned. "Don't eat it," he said, his voice low but firm. The other children stared at him, as if he'd just told them to abandon all their Halloween candy. "You've heard the stories, haven't you?" The group exchanged nervous glances. "You mean the candy witch?" A girl in a fairy costume whispered, her voice quivering slightly. "That's just a story." "Maybe," Felix replied, his eyes scanning the faces around him. "But stories don't leave candy on your doorstep." The boy hesitated, the candy still in his hand, fingers tightening around the wrapper. "But it smells so good," he muttered, almost to himself. Felix stepped forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "That's how she gets you." For a moment, the boy seemed to waver, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. But before Felix could say anything else, the wind shifted, and with it came the unmistakable scent of sugar, stronger than before, tugging at the senses like an invisible thread. It was coming from the woods. Felix turned his head toward the trees, where the shadows had grown long and thick, twisting like dark tendrils at the edge of the village. The scent grew stronger with each passing second, an invisible path winding through the air, leading straight into the forest. The other children felt it too. One by one, they turned their gazes toward the trees, drawn in by the sugary pull that now seemed impossible to ignore. "Do you smell that?" one of them asked, her voice trembling. Felix nodded slowly. "It's coming from the woods." Without another word, the group began to move, as if compelled by the scent alone, their feet carrying them toward the forest's edge. Felix's heart pounded in his chest. He knew the stories, the warnings, but there was something else now. An invitation, a beckoning. His legs moved almost on their own, following the others into the growing dark, the trees swallowing the last light of day. The further they went, the sweeter the air became, thick with the scent of molten sugar, syrup, and caramel. It clung to their skin, filled their lungs, until it was all they could think about. And then they saw it. Through the twisted branches and creeping vines, the house appeared, just as the legends had described. It stood tall and gleaming, a monstrous confection of sugar and spice. The roof was a cascade of chocolate shingles, dripping with caramel that glistened in the moonlight. The walls were made of gingerbread, frosted with thick, gleaming icing, and the windows shimmered with a faint glow, as if lit from within by candy flames. But it was the door that caught Felix's eye. A massive door of peppermint and licorice, slightly ajar as if waiting for them to enter. The children paused at the edge of the clearing, their breath shallow, hearts beating in time with the pulse of the forest. Felix's mind raced, torn between fear and curiosity. Every fibre of his being told him to turn back, to run, to warn the others. But the pull was too strong, the invitation too sweet. The Candy Witch's house stood before them, waiting. And Felix knew in that moment that they were not the first to stand at its doorstep, and they would not be the last. The house loomed before them, a beacon of sweetness in the gloom of the woods. Felix stood at the edge of the clearing, his eyes tracing the contours of the Candy Witch's home. An impossible structure of confections, shimmering in the pale moonlight. Every instinct in his body screamed for him to turn back, to flee from the pull of that sugary temptation. But his feet were rooted to the ground. The air was thick with the scent of caramel, syrup, and chocolate. So thick it felt like breathing in sugar itself. Around him the other children were already moving, drawn by the scent and the shimmering glow from within the house. They wandered forward as if in a trance, their eyes glazed over with anticipation. Felix wanted to call out, to stop them, but his voice was caught in his throat. The stories were true. Every warning, every whispered legend had come to life right before his eyes. The door of peppermint and licorice swung open wider, creaking softly as it revealed a hallway lined with candied walls and floors that glistened with a layer of sugar. It was almost too beautiful, too perfect, like a dream made of sweets. But Felix knew better. Beneath the sugary facade lay something dark, something that whispered of traps unseen. "Wait," Felix finally managed to say, his voice hoarse. "We can't just go in." The other children didn't seem to hear him, their steps slow but steady as they crossed the threshold. The first child, a girl with pigtails, reached out and brushed her fingers against the wall, her eyes widening in delight as her hand came away, dusted with sugar. Without hesitation, she licked her fingers, her face lighting up with a smile. "It's so good," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Felix's stomach twisted. "No!" he called louder now. "Don't eat anything." But it was too late. The girl turned to look at him, her eyes suddenly unfocused, her smile fading into something blank, hollow. She blinked once, twice, and then without a word, she walked deeper into the house, her figure disappearing into the shadows. The other children followed suit, each one stepping through the door and vanishing from sight, drawn further into the Candy Witch's lair. Felix's heart raced as he stood alone at the edge of the forest, watching them disappear one by one. He clenched his fists, his mind racing. He couldn't leave them, not now. Whatever spell the witch had woven around them, whatever trap she had set, he had to find a way to break it. Taking a deep breath, Felix stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the house. The moment he did, the air seemed to change. The sugary scent became overwhelming, almost suffocating. and the warmth from the caramel walls pressed in on him like a thick fog. The floor beneath him was soft, giving way like sponge cake under his feet. He had entered a world made entirely of candy, and yet there was no comfort in it, only a growing sense of dread. The hallway stretched out before him, longer than it should have been, twisting and turning in ways that defied logic. Felix glanced back over his shoulder, but the door had vanished, leaving only the endless hallway of sweets. There was no going back now. As he moved forward, Felix's eyes darted to the walls, the floor, the ceiling. Everywhere he looked, there were temptations, candied apples hanging from golden branches, bowls of chocolates that seemed to glow with an otherworldly light, piles of gumdrops and taffy scattered like treasures waiting to be claimed. The air hummed with the promise of indulgence, of pleasure beyond imagination. But Felix kept his hands at his sides, resisting the urge to reach out, to taste. He turned a corner, and there, at the end of the hallway, he saw them, the other children. They stood frozen in place, their eyes glazed over, their hands raised as if reaching for the candies that hung just out of their grasp. But they did not move. They were trapped, like statues made of sugar, suspended in a spell too sweet to break. Felix's breath caught in his throat. He took a step closer, but before he could reach them, the walls of the house began to shift. The floor beneath him trembled, and the soft scent of sugar was replaced with something sharper, more sinister, the unmistakable smell of burning caramel. The hallway around him warped and twisted, the gingerbread walls darkening as they closed in on him. He was caught in the witch's web, and the trap was tightening. He had to find a way out. He had to free the others. But the house was alive, its sugary sweetness hiding something far more dangerous beneath its surface. The candy witch's laughter echoed faintly through the halls, a sound that sent chills down Felix's spine. Somewhere, deep within the heart of this twisted kingdom of sugar, she was watching. And she was waiting. Felix stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest as the hallway around him seemed to breathe. The walls pulsed with a sickly sweet energy, the scent of burning caramel growing stronger, almost suffocating. The trapped children, their faces blank and unmoving, stood like statues in the distance, their fingers mere inches from the sugary delights that had ensnared them. And then, faintly at first but growing louder, Felix heard the whispers. They came from the very walls themselves, as if the house was speaking, the voices curling through the air like strands of cotton candy. It wasn't the mischievous laughter of children or the sing-song voice of the witch he had expected. No, these whispers were darker, older, carrying with them the weight of centuries of hunger and greed. Sweetness binds them, sweetness claims them. All who taste belong to her. The words sent a chill through Felix's body, his pulse quickening. He strained to hear more, but the voices were elusive, fading in and out like a distant echo, swallowed by the oppressive sweetness that filled the air. Beware the taste, beware the bite. One taste and all is lost. Felix swallowed hard, his mind racing. He hadn't tasted anything. He had resisted the candy's call, but the others hadn't been so lucky. They had given in, taken a single bite, and now they were trapped, their souls seemingly consumed by the witch's magic. His eyes scanned the room, searching for any clue, any sign that might help him break the spell. But the house offered nothing but temptation. Everywhere he looked, there were sweets, glistening in the dim light, rows of candied apples, bowls of rich golden toffee, towering cakes that shimmered with a glaze of sugar crystals. Everything was perfect, immaculate, designed to draw him in. But the whispers had warned him. One taste, and all was lost. Felix's gaze landed on the trapped children again, their still forms haunting in the flickering light. He had to free them. But how? The walls seemed alive, bending and warping as if the house itself was trying to confuse him, leading him deeper into its sugary labyrinth. And then there it was again, the faintest whisper, this time closer, clearer. There is a key, hidden deep in the sugar, the seed of her power. Felix's breath caught in his throat. A key. The idea of it tugged at his mind, a flicker of hope in the darkness. If there was a key, then there was a way to break the spell. But where? The house was vast, a maze of sweets and shadows, each corner more dangerous than the last. And somewhere, lurking in the dark, the candy witch was watching, waiting for him to make a mistake. He forced himself to move, his footsteps careful and quiet as he crept deeper into the house. The wall shimmered with sugar, the air heavy with the scent of molten caramel. But Felix kept his eyes sharp, his mind focused. He couldn't let the sweetness distract him. The hallway narrowed as he went on, the walls pressing closer, the whispers growing louder. His heart pounded in time with his steps, the weight of the candy witch's presence closing in around him. He knew she was near. He could feel her watching, her eyes gleaming like hard candy in the shadows. Suddenly, the hallway opened up into a massive chamber, its ceiling high and arched like the inside of a cathedral. But everything was made of sugar. The walls were lined with shelves upon shelves of candies, each more dazzling than the last. Jars of crystallized sweets, trays of chocolates shaped like jewels, and sugar sculptures that gleamed in the dim light. At the center of the room, a towering sugar throne stood, gleaming with a sickly, golden glow. And there, sitting upon the throne, was the Candy Witch. She was as beautiful as she was terrible. Her eyes sharp and cold, her skin the color of molten caramel. Her lips curved into a sweet, knowing smile, as she watched Felix enter the chamber, her fingers drumming softly on the arm of her throne. "You've come far, little one," she purred, her voice like syrup, thick and slow. "But you're not like the others, are you? So clever, so strong to resist my temptations." Felix's heart pounded in his chest, but he stood his ground, his mind racing. He knew this was it. This was the heart of her power. Somewhere in this room, hidden beneath the layers of sugar and temptation, was the key. He just had to find it before it was too late. The Candy Witch leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with amusement. "But tell me, child, how long can you resist?" Her voice was soft, almost tender, but Felix could hear the darkness beneath it, the hunger that echoed in the walls, the greed that pulsed through the sugar. She was waiting for him to falter, to give in. One bite, one taste, and he would be hers. But Felix wasn't here to be trapped. He was here to free the others. The whispers stirred again, soft and fleeting. The seed, the key, break her power. Felix's eyes darted to the shelves of candy, searching. Somewhere, hidden among the sweets, was the answer. The one thing that could free them all from the Candy Witch's grasp. He just had to find it before she found him. The Candy Witch's gaze bore into Felix, her caramel-colored eyes gleaming with wicked delight. She sat regally upon her sugar-spun throne, watching him with a quiet amusement, as if certain he would soon succumb to the sweetness that surrounded him. Her fingers, long and graceful, tapped lightly against the armrest, a subtle rhythm that echoed through the sugary chamber. Felix stood at the edge of the room, his mind racing. He could feel the weight of her gaze on him, feel the oppressive sweetness that filled the air, threatening to dull his senses. But he couldn't afford to falter now. The others were depending on him. The children who stood frozen, their eyes glazed over, their hands reaching for candies they would never taste. They were lost, trapped in a world of sugar and spells, and he was the only one left who could save them. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. The whispers had told him there was a key, something hidden within the witch's domain that could break her spell. But where? The room was vast, lined with shelves of glittering candies, each one more enticing than the last. Felix's eyes scanned the rows of sweets, searching for anything that might stand out, anything that might hold the power he needed to set them free. The Candy Witch watched him, with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You can look, little one," she said, her voice dripping with syrupy sweetness. "But there is nothing here for you. My kingdom is perfect, and soon you'll join the others forever." Felix's heart raced, but he didn't let her words distract him. There had to be a way out, a way to outsmart her. The stories had always spoken of her greed, her obsession with those who could resist her candy. She wanted them all, wanted them to fall to her temptations. But she also feared those who could outthink her. And that, Felix realized, was his advantage. His eyes narrowed as he considered the room once more. It was too perfect, too pristine. Every candy was immaculate, every jar in perfect alignment. The air itself seemed thick with magic, humming with the power of the witch's enchantment. But if there was a key, if there was something that could break her hold, it wouldn't be sitting out in the open. It would be hidden, disguised, waiting to be found. Felix's mind raced as he remembered the golden-wrapped candy that had appeared on his doorstep. He still had it, tucked away in his pocket, its shiny foil now crinkled from the weight of his hand. It was the first clue, the first sign that the candy witch's power could be undone. And perhaps it held the answer he was looking for. Without hesitation, Felix pulled the candy from his pocket, holding it up to the light. The golden wrapper shimmered faintly, its surface smooth and flawless. But there was something strange about it, something almost too perfect. He remembered the whispers from the house, the faint voice that had spoken of a hidden key, a seed of power buried within the sugar. Carefully, Felix began to unwrap the candy, his fingers moving with deliberate precision. The witch's eyes flickered with curiosity as she watched him, but she said nothing, her smile faltering ever so slightly. The candy inside was smooth, gleaming like a polished gemstone. It was almost too beautiful to be real, its surface shimmering with an iridescent glow. But Felix knew better. He had learned to trust his instincts, to look past the surface. This was no ordinary candy. He held it for a moment, feeling the weight of it in his hand. Then, with a swift motion, he snapped it in half. The candy broke apart with a soft, crystalline sound, revealing something hidden within. A small, glowing seed, pulsing with a faint golden light. Felix's heart skipped a beat. This was it. The key. The seed of the witch's power. Hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone clever enough to find it. The candy witch's smile vanished, her eyes narrowing into slits as she realized what Felix had done. "What have you?" But Felix didn't wait for her to finish. Clutching the glowing seed in his hand, he turned toward the trapped children, the ones frozen in their sugary prisons. The seed pulsed in his palm, its warmth spreading through his fingers. He could feel the power within it, the same power that had bound the children to the witch's will. He stepped forward, his heart pounding, and held the seed out toward the nearest child. The golden light grew brighter, casting long shadows across the room. And then slowly the spell began to break. The child blinked, their eyes clearing as the glaze of the witch's magic faded. Their hand fell away from the candy they had been reaching for, their body trembling as they took a deep breath, free for the first time. The candy witch let out a low, furious hiss, rising from her throne in a swirl of sugar and shadows. "You think you can break my kingdom with a mere seed?" she snarled, her voice twisted with rage. "I am the Candy Witch. This is my world." But Felix didn't stop. He moved from child to child, the golden seed glowing brighter with each step, breaking the spell one by one. The house around him trembled, the sugary walls beginning to crack as the witch's power unraveled. The whispers in the walls grew louder, their voices triumphant now. "The seed, the key, break her power." Felix knew he was close, but the witch's fury was just beginning, and he could feel her magic closing in, thick and dangerous as the sugar walls began to crumble. The air around Felix thickened as the Candy Witch's fury surged through the room like a storm. The sugary walls trembled, cracks snaking across the surface, threatening to collapse at any moment. The golden seed pulsed in Felix's hand, its glow dimming as the witch's power clawed its way back, trying to close the gaps in her crumbling spell. The children, though freed, stood dazed, their eyes still fogged with the remnants of the enchantment. They looked to Felix, their only hope in this strange kingdom of sugar and shadows. And the Candy Witch, her once sweet facade, now twisted with anger, advanced upon him, her figure towering over the room. Her eyes gleamed with the sharpness of shattered candy, and her voice was no longer the syrupy coo it had been moments before. It was venomous now, each word a shard of hardened caramel. "You think you are clever," she hissed, her voice echoing against the walls of her dissolving kingdom. "But you know nothing of what I offer. You break my spell, yet you cannot break the hunger within you. You crave what I create, as all children do." With a wave of her hand, the room transformed around him. What had once been a looming candy cathedral became an endless banquet of sweets, more magnificent than anything Felix had ever seen. Tables stretched out in every direction, laden with golden toffees, shimmering gumdrops, and chocolate fountains that cascaded like molten rivers. The scent was intoxicating, far stronger than before, each sweet whispering its own seduction, its own promise of indulgence. "Look around you, child," the witch said, her voice weaving itself into the sugary air, thick and sweet. "Taste just one, and all your dreams will come true. The world outside is full of bitterness and hardship, but here everything is sweet. Everything is mine." Felix's mouth watered, despite himself. The rich, velvety scent of dark chocolate filled his nostrils, and the sight of golden caramel apples glistening in the soft light made his fingers twitch. It would be so easy to reach out, to taste, to surrender to the sweetness. After all, hadn't he earned just one bite? One bite, and the tension in his chest would melt away, and he could forget the dangers, the fears. One taste, and everything could be soft and warm and sweet forever. The witch saw the hesitation in his eyes, and her lips curled into a smile. She knew the power of temptation, knew the delicate line between resistance and surrender. And she was patient, so patient, for she had seen many like Felix before. Children who thought they could outsmart her, who thought they could resist, only to fall to the first taste of her creations. Felix's heart pounded in his chest. The seed in his hand had dimmed, its glow faint now, nearly snuffed out by the overwhelming presence of the candy witch. His grip on it tightened, but even he could feel its power slipping away, drowned by the seductive pull of the witch's sweets. The room seemed to pulse with every heartbeat, the colors of the candies more vivid, more alluring. "Just one bite," the witch whispered, stepping closer, her eyes locked onto his. "You'll be free. I will give you whatever you desire. Power, wealth. You could be the king of this kingdom, never wanting for anything." Her words wrapped around him like a soft blanket, comforting and warm, promising a world without fear, without struggle. The golden chocolates gleamed like treasures, the rich scent filling his senses until it was all he could think about. For a moment, Felix's hand loosened, the seed slipping from his grasp as his gaze drifted toward the table of sweets, toward the candy that shimmered like stars in the night. But then a voice, faint but familiar, whispered at the back of his mind, "Beware the bite. One taste and all is lost." The whispers, the warning. Felix blinked, shaking his head, the fog of sweetness lifting for a brief moment. He remembered the children, the ones who had been trapped, their eyes glazed over, their hands outstretched, forever reaching for the candies they could never taste. He remembered the stories, the legends, the warnings that echoed through his village. Number. He couldn't give in. He wouldn't. Felix tightened his grip on the seed, the golden light flaring weakly in his palm. The witch's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing as she sensed his resolve harden once more. She could feel it, the moment slipping away from her. "You're stronger than I thought," she murmured, her voice softening to that sweet, sickly tone she had used before. "But no one is strong enough to resist forever." Felix's gaze hardened, his mind clearing as he turned away from the tempting banquet. "I don't need forever," he said, his voice steady. "I just need to resist you long enough." And with that, he took a step back from the table of sweets, the golden seed glowing brighter in his hand once again. The candy witch's smile twisted into a snarl, her hands curling into fists as her sugary world began to crack and fracture around her. The temptation of sweet delights had failed to claim him, but Felix knew that the hardest part was still to come. The candy witch wasn't finished yet, and neither was he. The air around Felix shifted, growing colder, sharper, as if the sweetness had curdled and turned sour. The Candy Witch's smile disappeared entirely, replaced by a look of pure malice, her once soft features hardening into something ancient and terrible. The sugar-sweet scent that had filled the room with its false warmth was gone, replaced by the bitter tang of burnt caramel and scorched sugar. The candy world around them began to distort, the vibrant colors draining away as cracks spread through the walls and floor like spiderwebs. "You insolent child," the witch hissed, her voice no longer sweet but sharp, each word cutting through the air like shards of glass. "Do you think you can defy me? Do you think you can resist the very thing that makes you weak? Sweetness is the nature of all children. Greed is what drives you." Felix's heart pounded in his chest, but he stood his ground, clutching the golden seed tightly in his hand. The glowing warmth of it was the only thing that anchored him, as the witch's fury lashed through the room, warping the very space around him. He could feel her magic pressing down on him, trying to suffocate him in its bitter wrath, but he refused to give in. The witch raised her arms, and with a flick of her wrist, the candy walls around them began to shift and reshape, twisting into grotesque forms. What had once been a world of sugary delights became something far more sinister. The walls dripped with dark, oozing caramel, and jagged shards of candy cane sprouted from the floor, sharp as spears. The chocolate fountains that once flowed like rivers of liquid gold now bubbled and hissed, their surface black and boiling. "You will not leave my kingdom," the witch snarled, her eyes burning with fury. "I will see you trapped here for eternity, just like the others." Felix took a step back, his eyes darting around the room, searching for a way out. The golden seed pulsed weakly in his hand, its light flickering as the witch's magic pressed in on him, threatening to extinguish it completely. But Felix knew that this seed, the key to her power, was his only hope. If he could protect it, he could break her hold on the children, on the entire Candy Kingdom. The witch's fury deepened as she sensed his defiance, and with a guttural growl, she raised her arms once more. The ground beneath Felix's feet trembled, and from the sugary earth, twisted shapes began to rise. Figures formed from candy and darkness, their bodies made of hardened sugar and sharp-edged sweets, their faces twisted into monstrous grins. These were the witch's servants, her guardians, creatures made to defend her kingdom from intruders. Felix's breath caught in his throat as the creatures began to move, their limbs creaking and cracking as they advanced toward him. He could see the gleam of their sharp candy claws, the hunger in their hollow eyes. They closed in around him, the air growing colder as the witch's wrath tightened its grip. But Felix wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. His mind raced as he searched for a way out, a way to defeat these twisted creations. The whispers from before, still echoed faintly in the back of his mind, urging him onward, reminding him that there was a way to break the witch's power. He just had to think. He just had to outsmart her. He tightened his grip on the golden seed, feeling its warmth once more. And as he did, an idea began to form. The creatures were made from the same candy that filled the witch's world, her creations bound by her magic. And if the seed was the key to her power, then perhaps it could be the key to their undoing as well. Felix took a deep breath and stepped forward, raising the golden seed high. The creatures paused for a moment, their heads tilting as if confused by the light. The witch let out a snarl of anger, but Felix didn't stop. He moved quickly, dodging the outstretched claws of the nearest creature and thrusting the seed toward its chest. The moment the seed touched the candy creature, a brilliant light erupted from it, blindingly bright and golden. The creature let out a shriek, its body cracking and splintering as the light pulsed through it. Within seconds, the candy form shattered into 1,000 glittering shards, falling to the ground in a heap of broken sugar. The other creatures hesitated, their movements sluggish and uncertain as the light from the seed flickered and danced around them. Felix felt a surge of hope. This was it. This was the way to stop her. But the witch was not finished. Her face twisted into a mask of rage, and with a furious cry, she raised her hands once more, sending a wave of dark magic crashing towards Felix. The force of it knocked him off his feet, the seed tumbling from his hand and skidding across the floor. Felix scrambled to his feet, his eyes wide as the witch loomed over him, her shadow stretching long and dark across the candy-strewn floor. Her voice was a low, venomous growl, filled with the weight of centuries of hunger and greed. "You will never defeat me," she hissed. "I am eternal. I am sweet. And you are nothing." But even as the witch's wrath bore down upon him, Felix knew one thing for certain. Her power could be broken. He had seen it in the light of the golden seed, in the shattering of her creatures. He just needed to reach the seed again, needed to find the strength to resist her one last time. And then, perhaps, the candy witch's reign of sweetness and terror would finally come to an end. The witch's laughter filled the air, a sound that seemed to curl and twist like tendrils of burnt sugar, each note laced with malice. Felix lay sprawled on the ground, the sharp sweetness of the witch's magic pressing down on him like a weight. The golden seed had rolled far from his grasp, its light flickering faintly across the shadowed floor. His body ached, and the oppressive scent of caramel and candy clung to him, thick and cloying, making it hard to breathe. He knew he had to move, had to reach the seed before the witch could snuff out its light entirely. But the floor beneath him was slick. and the room itself seemed to shift and bend as if the very walls were conspiring to hold him down. The creatures, though hesitant, began to stir again, their forms solidifying from shards of broken candy, their hollow eyes gleaming with renewed hunger. "You think you are strong?" the witch sneered, stepping closer, her figure towering above him, like a dark shadow against the shimmering walls of her kingdom. "But strength cannot save you here. This is my world, my creation, and in the end, all will belong to me." Felix's breath was shallow, each inhale tinged with the sickly sweet scent of the witch's magic. But as the witch spoke, her voice dripping with certainty, a flicker of defiance flared inside him. Her arrogance, her greed, this was her weakness. He had seen it in the way she gloated, the way she believed herself invincible. And if there was one thing Felix knew, it was that no one, not even the Candy Witch, was invincible. His gaze darted toward the golden seed, still glowing faintly, where it had come to rest against the base of a towering gingerbread pillar. It pulsed with a quiet, rhythmic light, and in that light, Felix saw something he hadn't noticed before. The seed was changing, its surface shifting as if it were alive. And at its core, hidden beneath the layers of a light, he saw a pattern, an intricate design woven into the very fabric of the seed. It wasn't just a key, it was something more. Something ancient, something powerful. The whispers echoed in his mind again, faint but insistent. The seed, the key, break her power. Felix's eyes widened as understanding washed over him. The seed wasn't just a tool to break the witch's spell, it was the source of her magic. Her greed had led her to bury her own power within it, thinking no one would ever find it. No one clever enough to see through the layers of sweetness and illusion she had built around herself. But now, Felix saw the truth. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes locked on the seed, ignoring the sharp pain in his limbs and the creatures that crept closer, their candy bodies snapping and creaking with every movement. The witch's gaze followed him, her smile fading as she saw the determination in his eyes. "You cannot win," she growled, her voice low and dangerous. "I will not be undone by a mere child." But Felix didn't listen. His hand shot out, grasping the seed just as the witch lunged toward him, her clawed hands reaching for his throat. The moment his fingers closed around the seed, a surge of warmth shot through him, the golden light flaring brighter than ever before. It filled the room with a blinding glow, pushing back the dark tendrils of the witch's magic. And for a moment, everything was still. The creatures froze, their hollow eyes wide, their bodies trembling as the light washed over them. And then, slowly, they began to dissolve, their candy forms crumbling to dust, swept away by the golden light. The witch let out a scream of fury, her voice rising in a terrible crescendo as the power she had hoarded for centuries began to unravel. Felix felt the weight of the seed in his hand shift, and as he looked down, he saw that the intricate pattern had grown brighter, the design becoming clearer. The whispers echoed in his mind once more, louder now, guiding him toward the truth. The seed, the heart, the end of her reign. With a burst of clarity, Felix understood. The seed was the heart of the witch's kingdom, the core of her magic. And it wasn't just a key to break the spell. It was the very thing that could destroy her. He tightened his grip on the seed, the light swelling around him. And in that moment, he made his choice. With all his strength, Felix hurled the seed toward the witch, the golden light trailing behind it like a comet. The witch's eyes widened in shock, her hands reaching out to stop it. But it was too late. The seed struck her chest with a flash of blinding light, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then the world around them began to shatter. The gingerbread pillars cracked, the candy walls splintering as the witch's power unraveled, the very fabric of her kingdom dissolving into nothingness. The witch let out one final furious scream before her form collapsed into dust, swept away by the golden light. And then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. The golden light dimmed, and the candy kingdom crumbled around Felix, leaving only the soft glow of the seed, now resting quietly on the ground. The air was clear, the oppressive sweetness gone, and the children, the ones who had been trapped, began to stir, their eyes blinking as if waking from a long sleep. Felix stood in the silence, his heart racing, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. He had done it. He had broken the spell, freed the children, and ended the Candy Witch's reign. But as he looked down at the seed, still faintly glowing with that mysterious golden light, Felix couldn't help but wonder, had he truly destroyed her? Or was this only the beginning of something far deeper, far darker? The whispers had stopped, but their echoes lingered, haunting the edges of his mind. The kingdom of sugar and sweetness lay in ruins, a scattered wasteland of broken candy and fading enchantment. Felix stood at the center of it all, surrounded by the remnants of the Candy Witch's power. The once perfect world of spun sugar and chocolate fountains had crumbled into dust, leaving only a faint echo of the magic that had held it together. The air, once thick with the scent of caramel and syrup, was now sharp and clear, a quiet reminder of what had been lost. But something lingered, a presence, faint, almost imperceptible, but there. The golden seed, still glowing softly at Felix's feet, hummed with a strained, quiet energy. It was not the malicious force it had been before, but rather something different, something older and more mysterious. Felix knelt and picked up the seed, turning it over in his hands. Its warmth was familiar now, no longer threatening, but still powerful. He could feel its pulse, like the beating of a small heart, steady and constant. This was the heart of the witch's magic, the key to her kingdom. And yet, as he held it, Felix realized that the magic within it wasn't entirely gone. It was broken, yes, fractured, its hold on the children shattered. But something remained, something deeper. The children around him, once trapped in sugary prisons, were waking, their eyes blinking open as if from a long sleep. They stirred slowly, their movements tentative, as though unsure of the world around them. Felix watched, as one by one they regained their senses, the glaze of the witch's enchantment lifting from their faces. They looked at each other, confused, disoriented, but alive. "Is it over?" a voice asked, trembling slightly. It was the girl with pigtails, her eyes wide and cautious as she glanced around at the ruins of the Candy Kingdom. Felix nodded slowly, though the weight of the seed in his hand told him there was more to this ending than any of them could understand. "Yes," he said quietly. "The witch is gone. You're free now." The children murmured among themselves, their voices a mix of relief and uncertainty. The spell was broken, and yet the remnants of the witch's magic still hung in the air, a faint, invisible thread connecting them all to what had just happened. They had been part of her kingdom, part of her world of temptations and traps. And even though they were free, the memory of that sweetness would linger. Felix stood up, the seed still glowing in his hand. He felt its weight, its strange pull, and wondered what to do next. The witch was gone, but her power remained locked in this tiny glowing heart. He could sense it, waiting, watching, as though it held a secret no one had yet uncovered. The ground beneath his feet was firm again, no longer the soft, sticky sweetness of the Candy Kingdom. The air was clean, crisp with the chill of the Halloween night. But the world felt different now. It was as if the witch's presence, her magic, had left a scar on the very air around them, an invisible mark that could never be fully erased. The children began to gather around him, their eyes fixed on the glowing seed. They didn't say anything, but Felix could feel their unspoken question, their shared curiosity. What now? What did they do with this magic? This power that still pulsed in his hand? Could it be destroyed? Should it be? Felix looked down at the seed, the intricate patterns etched into its surface still shimmering faintly. The whispers had gone silent, but their echoes remained, haunting the edges of his mind. He knew the seed held power, great power, but it also held danger. The witch's greed had been her downfall, her insatiable hunger for control. If the wrong hands found this seed, who knew what might happen? For a moment, Felix considered crushing it, grinding it to dust beneath his heel. But as he raised his hand, the seed pulsed once more, a faint glow emanating from its core. It wasn't malevolent, it was almost pleading. There was something alive within it, something that had been waiting for a long time, trapped beneath layers of greed and temptation. Felix hesitated. Could something good come from this? Could the seed be more than just a remnant of the witch's power? He closed his fingers around the seed, its warmth spreading through his hand. Maybe there was another way. Maybe the magic didn't have to be destroyed. It could be changed, reshaped, used for something better. With a deep breath, Felix slipped the seed into his pocket. The light faded, but the warmth remained, a quiet reminder of the journey he had just taken. He didn't know what the future held, but for now, the children were free. The Candy Witch's kingdom lay in ruins, and Halloween night had returned to its quiet, moonlit calm. The wind whispered through the trees as Felix and the children turned back toward the village. The path ahead clear, but tinged with the mystery of what had been left behind. The legend of the Candy Witch would live on, but it was no longer a tale of fear and temptation. It was now a story of resilience, of cleverness, and of the boy who had resisted the sweetest trap of all. And as they walked, the golden seed pulsed softly in Felix's pocket, a quiet promise that magic, in the right hands, could be something far greater than greed.